Hi, everybody. Welcome back again to Adoption Happy Hour, brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, and our mission is to unify the adoption community, elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connection. My name is Greg Gentry. I'm a domestic infant adoptee from the baby scoop era, and we appreciate everybody having the chance to come out tonight to hear our guest, Kristal, talk about her film, and we'll be introducing her in just a minute here, but we do have some housekeeping items. Beth, if you'd like to share those. First of all is our basic introductory slide here. Just some reminders while you're in the space here. We do ask that you remain on mute and raise your hand either on the screen using the Zoom function or virtual or visually so that we can see you. And you may post in the chat, and we do recommend that, and it's always welcome for us here. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thoughts, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988. This is a public meeting, and there is no guarantee that information or identity is confidential, and portions of the event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. Any other announcements tonight, Beth?
Yes, but just a moment.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm going to put this on speaker and see if that does better. Okay, yes, let me share the next slide.
You.
Can you see the whole slide, or do you see the people in the middle?
We see the whole slide.
Okay, good, because my screen looks wacky. Okay, that's what
Yeah, it's a little different, but we can still see the details.
Okay. We want to remind you of all of NAAP's programming. We come to you several times every month with really unique and relevant and helpful programming. Happy Hour is the first and the third Friday of each month, hosted by Greg Gentry, with a whole host and a variety of different guests and different topics, all relating to the adoption community. And then the second or third Tuesday, and the next one will be actually May 20th, Dr. Joyce comes to us with Putting Yourself Together After Reunion. And many of us know the ups and downs of reunion, and she is very, very helpful at helping us navigate those journeys. And then we also have Amy Seek hosting First Families, Birth Parents Journeying Together. And that is the second Thursday of each month. And adoptees are welcome as well, but many of the participants in that are First Families. Amy herself is a birth mother. And then last each month, we have Dr. Liz DeBetta facilitating Migrating Toward Wholeness, Rewriting Adoption Narratives in the Constellation. They meet the fourth Thursday of each month, and I believe that's the 24th yet coming up here in April. So there's all sorts of NAAP programming for you all throughout the month, and we hope that you will be able to take advantage of the opportunities. That's it for me.
Great. Thanks so much, Beth. Well, I'm really pleased to introduce our guest tonight, Kristal Parke. She's a mother, a podcaster, a producer, a filmmaker, and an adoptee advocate with a passion for storytelling and connecting communities. She is a second-generation domestic interracial adoptee who first built her career as a hairstylist and business owner, later becoming a facilitator in addiction treatment centers. Kristal, who has been sober since 2011, is dedicated to bringing often overlooked stories to light, offering insights and understanding around identity, belonging, and the nuances of adoption. She's also a very wonderful person and a real friend, and I'm just very honored to have you here tonight, Kristal. Welcome to the NAAP Happy Hour.
Oh, thank you for having me so much. I love Greg. I love you, Greg. I love you so much. You have been, you were there at the very beginning of this journey of me coming into adoptee land online. And you were one of the first adoptees, if not the first adoptee to watch my film. And you have just been a great friend. And I finally got to meet him in person. last
Yes.
month, and it was a great experience. So I'm so happy to be here, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you. And it was really nice to meet you in person. And yeah, we've been having this conversation going on for almost 2 years now, I think, since you first let me know about the film. Kind of, and it was under the radar for most people, right? You were feeling some apprehension. You weren't sure of a few things, of course. And I
Yeah.
was truly honored to be able to see your film. And I've seen it probably 4 times now, including getting to watch it in with you in other calls and ask you questions about it then. And there's probably a number of people who haven't seen the film yet, but could you tell us a little bit about it, what it's called and what the theme is?
Yeah, the film is called Because She's Adopted. And it is really just my journey of discovery. I am also an NPE, which I didn't even know until probably like even after I did the film, to be honest. I didn't really realize that I too fell under that category. And that was that discovery was what inspired me to create the film. And so you just kind of come along with me on this journey of meeting my biological father, my birth father, my first father, and then also you come along all the way across the Canada to northern Manitoba, where I get to meet my Indigenous family for the very first time. And they are the Opaskwayak Cree Nation people. I am Opaskwayak. And my first mother, she is also an adoptee, but she was removed in the Canadian 60s scoop. And so for those of you who don't know, the 60s scoop in Canada is a little bit different from the 60s scoop in the United States. In Canada, it's sort of another branch of the residential school system in assimilating Indigenous children into colonial culture. And so quite literally, and if you haven't seen the movie or the series Little Bird, it is a great, great series to watch. And as an adoptee, it just, I mean, I cried every single episode, but it does give a clear understanding of what the 60s scoop was here in Canada. Children were stolen right off of their land and taken, separated, adopted out into white families to carry out this assimilation agenda through the Canadian federal government. So I don't get into all of that too much, but that is definitely something that I do like to speak about whenever I come on things like this, especially because in the United States, it is a little bit different from Canada. So yeah, I come from a adoptive family where there is a lot of adoption, and through the film you will have all sorts of discoveries of surprises, and it's just, I don't know, I did my very, very best. It was my very first film that I ever did. I was not a filmmaker up until that point, but I just wanted to tell my story through documentary film and through the support of many people. And I would say, some natural kind of producer type skills that I possessed, I was able to put this thing together, and I'm proud of it. And I'm a different person, definitely, from the woman that you see on screen. I mean, I'm still me, I'm still goofy and everything,
Sure.
but I would say that even how I perceive adoption now, and yeah, my outlook has changed so much. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into specifically things like that. And I of course, have the advantage of having been in a dialogue with you for, again, for almost 2 years about the film, including my first impressions of it. One of the things you said really early on, after I saw it for the first time and before it had shown in Fireside, was you felt like as soon as it stopped recording, as soon as you stopped filming, that it was almost strange to you in a way, like, or foreign in a sense. Is it because there's things that elapse in the production phase of the film that you're always interpreting your experience going along, and there are parts of it maybe that are harder to recognize of yourself?
oh, can you ask that question again?
Yeah, let's put it this way. As in the course of making the film,
Yeah.
you had said that by the time the finished product was out,
Yeah.
there were almost things in it you didn't feel were
Yeah.
as representative of where you were in that point in time.
Yes.
So I wondered
Yes.
if you could talk a little bit about things that may have changed from the time you were making the film to how you felt in the aftermath of that.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a line in there where I say, I think adoption's beautiful, but I also believe that there's a very, very painful side of adoption. Um, and I don't know if I would necessarily utter those words again on a screen that, you know, people are going to watch this film over and over and over again. But I would say there are parts of my life that are beautiful. The connection that I had with my adoptive mother, with my adoptive family, like that really is a beautiful thing that I had. And but it doesn't negate that I also had trauma, and it showed up and came out in many different ways in my life too. So yeah, definitely that. And I don't know if I told you this, Greg, but I actually removed a piece of the film because it bothered me that much. And
Wow.
have I told you this?
I haven't heard about this.
Okay.
No.
So my husband, bless him, like he's been my biggest supporter through all of this. You'll see him in the film. He has been by my side for all of these years, and um, especially through the creation of this film. And there was some tragedy that happened within the film as well that you'll see if you haven't seen it yet. But he at the end, and I think it's really indicative to how society likes to sort of wrap up adoption in this bow, right? Like, okay, well, look at this girl, you know, she went through all this trauma, she went through all these struggles and whatnot. But um, I think for my husband, he wanted to be like, okay, but like, let's button this up and put a bow on it. And like, okay, you told your story now, and everything is great. And do we ever have to talk about this adoption stuff ever again kind of thing? And the answer is yes. I said to him, the answer is yes, forever. We will be talking about adoption. But what he says at the end is that I went all the way to Manitoba, and came back and realized that my true family was my adoptive family all along. And at first, like when I first created and that's just so, it just goes to show that who I was and what my understanding was and where I was at in my journey. That didn't even cross my mind when I was in the editing suite with my editor. But now every time I would hear that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's so dismissive of my first mother, of my first father, of all of the family that I just met here at the Opaskwayak at Cree Nation. You know, we took the film back 3 years later after filming there, and the community came together, and they had more people show up for this screening than any other screening they ever had. my family showed up, family that I'd never met before. They honored me with a blanketing ceremony. And and then I had just showed this film that my husband said her true family was her adoptive family. So he wasn't meaning that to say, to say it in a hurtful way or anything, but I think that for him, my adoptive family was the family that was always kind of there for me. And my birth mother, she's had a lot of struggles within her life, and it's been a difficult relationship. And so I think that he couldn't look at her as my true family. So I took that part out.
You know, it's really interesting, and I do clearly remember that part.
Do you?
Oh, I remember it in there for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think by like September 2023, when we showed it in Firesides, that would have been the second time I saw it. In fact, I think I remember having a conversation with you about it, but I probably didn't understand at the time whether anything had been written out, or, whether there were pieces read by people, or whether they were extemporaneous, just speaking organically by people. I do remember that piece, and I think it's very interesting that it came out, that you took it out. And the reason I say that, of course, is because, just as you said here, it shows a progression, right? A progress and journey. And I think that was actually tied to the question I had at the beginning, which was, you got to the end and you had this product, but you changed along the way making it, right? And then wrapping it all up, as you said. Now, I will say, after meeting Stuart, and the lovely guy that he is, he's so invested in your story, though. I wonder, he must have had some shifts too. I'm sure you had some painful conversations about this along the way too. And I'm not trying to get too personal with your conversations about that, but the fact is, you had some pretty raw moments in the film talking, right? And there was a lot of emotion in there, and I kind of wonder whether it was hard to have the cameras roll when the emotion comes out, or in fact, the way you even start the film, oh, we're going to get right into it, huh?
Yeah.
Is really, and the way you end it, though, you end it with that little bit of humor. It's really wonderful how you did it. But I do wonder if it's hard to record moments like that. Most of us haven't done that.
Yeah, it's really so incredible, this thing of creating a documentary, because I got to have conversations with family members that I would never have had if I wasn't doing a documentary. Like, how often do you sit down with your adoptive brother and like say, listen, like, I was absolutely traumatized by being an adopted person. I never really felt like I fit in. You know, and the on and on and on. And those were things that, when you have a camera there, first of all, nothing was scripted. Nothing was scripted. The only thing that was planned was where we were going to go and who we were going to meet. And then everything else was just literally just cameras rolling and capturing whatever was happening at that time. And so, yeah, like for me, after a while, when you're sitting there and you do these interviews, and some of these interviews are like 8 hours long, right? You've got a full film day. You just kind of forget that you're in front of a camera. You forget that the lights are on you, and you just sit and you just share your story. And that, this is your opportunity to say everything. Because I think for me, I didn't want to go back and look at the footage and go, oh, geez, I wish I had have told this person I loved them, or I wish I had have, shared more candidly about that. And so with everything, and Stuart really, like, my husband really, really impressed me, because he too, like, he had a full 8-hour interview. And he shared some things that will never hit the light of day. Like they will not. But he shared, and not to like just expose us or me or anything like that, but I think it was his investment. He knew that in sharing the struggles that we had in our marriage with addiction and such, that it could help somebody. And I think at the end of the day, that was my heart. If I hold back, and I wasn't even going to put the addiction piece in there. I'd been in the editing suite with my editor for days and days and days, and it just like wasn't hitting right. And I was gonna just say, like, let's scrap it, let's take it out. And that was probably, that piece has been one of the greatest connecting pieces when I have shown the film to fellow adoptees and people. So I'm glad I didn't take it out,
It was very powerful. It's hard to watch what it was doing to your relationship, and it was out there. It was very, very raw. And of course, I don't want to ruin it for everybody who's going to watch the film, but the authenticity that comes out between the two of you, and also the interviews with your family members, very, very genuine, and the quality is exquisite. There's some scenery in there, man. You guys, you really produced something very. I hope you're really, really proud of the quality of what you did. I imagine once it was complete, you were like, did you have to create distance for a while? Were you like, oh, I need to let down now? Or I'm just kind of wondering what the experience right afterwards was like.
I was like, okay, I've created this thing and it's so meaningful. It's my life. Like, it's my life story. It's a piece of my life story. It's not all of it. It's, a 2-year period that was sort of captured in time. And then it was, I'm like, how do I get this out there? How do I get this film out there? How do I get people to watch it? And I couldn't put it out into the world publicly. Like, I couldn't have it up on my website for rent or anything like that, because we were doing the film festival circuit. So that was going on for a year. So I couldn't really show it publicly. I showed it to a few groups, like I think I can't think of the name.
Fireside.
Oh, Fireside. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. I showed it to Fireside a few times and did, I think, one other kind of, we did a in-person screening here at my studio, which was a result of just, I felt depressed after I finished the film. I felt depressed. I felt like I'd been riding on this train full speed ahead for 2 years. I had had some of the most profound growing moments and experiences. I had one of the greatest losses of my whole life on while we were filming, and it was during COVID as well, and so it was almost depressing when it was done, because I'm like, okay, I have this thing, like, now what do I do with it? And nobody was throwing me a party to be like, hey, look, you created this. Not that I expect anyone to be, but even for myself, I find it hard to, I have such a disconnect at times, like it's like, oh yeah, I did this film, like, yeah, whatever, big deal kind of thing, right? But when you really think about everything that went into creating it, it was something to be proud of. So.
And I know you just said about the indigenous piece, that was something you didn't get into as deeply, or don't go into as deeply. It was so impactful, though, I think, for somebody who knew very little about it comparatively. about residential schools, etc.,
Yeah.
and the people you met. And I feel like there were just, it was a profound statement for me. And I know you drove far to do that. There's like that caravan going out. You went
Yeah.
far. And you ended up making some amazing discoveries there. And I won't ask you to disclose all of them because I do want people to go see your movie. Um, but did you find that people you did interact with there had already an idea about adoption that was kind of fully formed? They must have had a really interesting, I don't say it dispassionately, a real perspective on adoption as a culture that maybe other cultures don't have. Like in the US, for example, where I know we have ICWA, for example, but by and large, the US is kind of like still pretty sold, still very sold on the adoption is beautiful narrative. You went into your culture and into the Cree Nation, and they must have had a completely different idea of what adoption was to them, um, and how it felt and how devastating it must have been to them. So what was it like to interact with them about it and to hear some of the validation that they gave you?
Oh yeah, like you'll see there's two different people I chat with, and the validation that they gave me was, and they're not adopted people. The interesting thing about the Indigenous community is that they understand fully what family separation is.
That's what I'm getting at. That's what I hoped you would
They
comment on.
understand
Yeah.
that. They understand loss of culture, loss of names, loss of language, loss of connection, loss of, like, so much loss. They understand that so deeply because of what they had been through. And so I often like a lot of the Indigenous community, they connect deeply to my film, not just because I have some Indigenous elements in it where I go back and reconnect, but they connect to it deeply because of the feeling of not belonging. Because a lot of these individuals that went to residential school and lost their language, weren't raised by their mother and their father, they come back to the reserve, to their land, and like they don't belong there either anymore. So they don't necessarily belong in like the Western world kind of, but then they don't belong on like with their community. And so there's this like in between space that I think a lot of us adoptees can feel at times, where you don't feel like you fully belong over here, but you fully belong over here, and you're kind of somewhere in the middle. And so their compassion for me was shocking, especially because they considered me to be one of their lost children. Jennifer Flett, in the trailer, she says, but you did suffer. Like, I always felt like I didn't deserve to let's say, get my my Indian status, right? Because I didn't suffer the same ways that the community suffered. And she said to me, but you have, because you didn't know us, because you weren't here, because the government made a decision that your mom didn't need to be here, and that you didn't need to be here either, and that you didn't need to be connected to your family, to us, to here. And I mean, I didn't look at myself in that way. I think that's another really interesting thing about creating this thing, is that everybody perceives it in a different way. And that has been expanding for me. It's taught me so much about different things. I'm so appreciative, you know, like I often say, you know, when you create a piece of art and you put it out there into the world, you can't be too attached to the outcome. You know, my heart was to help one person and to touch one person. And I mean, there were so many days in filming where I'd look up and my whole crew was in tears, you know, because they started to get it. And see, there I go. I'm trying not to cry.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I know. I know.
So it was a very profound experience, you know, I would say 10 years worth of healing and 2 years worth of filming, and just so meaningful, so meaningful.
That's, yeah. It's hard not to be very moved by it, and also very moved by how it's coming out of you right now.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because I felt
Oh,
tears starting to come, and I was like, shut it down, shut it down. No, being attached to the outcome when you create something. So for me, I got to this place where it wasn't like, I didn't necessarily care if somebody loved or they hated the film. For me, it was if they were going to be apathetic to the film. Like if it meant nothing to them, like if it didn't impact them at all, you know, if they didn't walk away learning a little bit about what it's like to be an adopted person. And so I always say, like, whether they love it or whether they hate it, the point for me was to help them to feel something, anything, whatever that was, you know, because that little seed can branch off into all sorts of healing, you know?
responses, and yet I'm sure you hope for a certain outcome of maybe it's that there's a certain audience that would see it, or that would have that it would spread to a certain population. Do you feel encouraged by the reception of the film so far? I've only ever heard people say great things about it.
Yeah, I do. I feel really, yeah, I've had incredible feedback. Um, the hardest person that um to watch the film with, I would say, was my friend Sharon, who is an adoptee but also adopted a son. And she could only kind of watch it from the eyes of an adopted parent. And she was very like protective of her son's experience as an adoptee. And so that was probably the hardest person to watch that with. And I told her that, like, we've talked about it and we've, you know, we've shared so much with each other. We're dear friends, but yeah, there's people in my family who haven't watched it. Like my adopted dad and my one adopted brother have not watched it.
If not, it hadn't even occurred to me to think about who near to you wouldn't have seen it. Yeah, that must create some feelings.
You
Yeah.
know, for my dad, I understand because of some of the content of the film is very traumatic. And so for him, it's yeah. So I understand. I think for him it might re-traumatize him, you know, through that time, that hard time that we went through. Even for me, I had to stop watching the film when I would do screenings because it would just pull me back into you know, my pain and my grief. And I just couldn't watch it anymore. Or I chose not to watch it anymore, because then I do a Q&A like this and I couldn't, like I was just way too emotional, right? And I wanted to be able
Yeah.
to show up in a better way. So
That makes a lot of sense. You know, you brought up something that is also very, very powerful in the film, which is, I don't know how often you speak about it apart from the film, but it's the fact of being an NPE.
mhm.
Um, just how barely you laid that up. By barely, I don't mean like you just barely made it. I mean, it was out there. You said, I also had this experience.
Yeah.
And when you said that, and you know, I've seen the film, holy mackerel, that is what you're talking about. And maybe, you know, my adoptee lens always shifts back to this, but yeah, you have had that as well. And I think there are probably some other people watching here who have also had that experience.
Mhm.
Um, do you mind talking a little bit about what that was like for you?
Yeah, like, so, um, when I was 17, my adoptive parents found um, my birth mother and my birth father. And my birth mother and I had a beautiful reunion. She always wanted to see me again. And my birth father was very apathetic. He basically said, well, you are a blood relative, so I guess you do deserve to know your family history. And that felt like rejection. So I never reached out to him again for 20 years. I was so afraid to reach out to him because I couldn't stand the potential rejection I might feel again. And so I had done Ancestry and I'd gotten connected with all these Italian family members. And one of my closest matches was a gentleman by the name of Dino Marino. And I just love that name and I love him. And so we didn't know how we were connected. And so he, you know, he tried and tried and tried. And I asked everybody on there, do you know this man named Bob? And nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew the first name, the last name, nothing. No one was connected to him. And then, of course, on a Friday night at 9 o'clock, I log on to Ancestry and here I have a match and it says parent-child relationship. And the man who is named my father, Greg, his name's not Bob, it's Greg. And I have so much compassion for anybody who has been through that experience, because for me personally, it shook my foundation. I felt like I didn't have legs to stand on anymore. Everything that I thought was a certain way wasn't at all. And it just blew my mind. It blew my mind. And I reached out to him and he had no idea I existed, but wanted to know me. I often share the very first sort of communication we had with each other, where he said to me, I had no idea you existed, but I'm so proud to be your father. And I'm so proud that you're my daughter. And there's three most important words you can say to another person. And that's that I love you. And that's what he said to me. And so we've had this sweet little relationship, friendship since then. I meet him on camera. He is quite the guy. You know, I grew up in a family where nobody was musical except for me. And, you know, he is a traveling musician, or was a traveling musician. Now he's a busker. And my grandfather, my grandmother, they performed in bars and nightclubs and traveled all over the place. And, you know, and so it was really neat to see that really did come from somewhere. And yeah. And I recognize that not everybody's experience is as pleasant as that. But it is my experience. And I felt shame at times sharing. I felt guilty when I would share sometimes with other adoptees, you know, that I had this beautiful experience with this father, because I know that that's not typical. And, but I will say with my mother, it's been a much more difficult relationship to navigate through. But she's an adoptee too. She's a first mother too. Like she's got her pain, she's got her stuff, and it's real, it's valid. And I would not, this might not be a popular opinion, but I'm going to say this. I just don't believe that us adoptees have the cornerstone of suffering. I don't. Yes, we didn't ask to be relinquished, but we can't negate what everybody else went through too, because everybody has their story. And I think as a filmmaker and a storyteller, that's important for me to acknowledge. Because I even look at my film now and I think I could have been a lot more compassionate towards my first mother in this film, but it just wasn't where I was at the time. I thought that I had suffered way more than her. So I don't know.
And she's an adoptee too.
Yeah.
And she's a first mother.
Mm-hmm.
And a displaced person.
I just don't
So
think
many
we
things.
can get into this like comparing suffering, you know, and that's what my
Yeah.
family at the Opaskwayak Cree Nation shared was, you know, we can't get into comparing our suffering because you can't quantify it, right? And if we all just have compassion for each person, each individual for what they've been through, I mean, that's the way to move through that, right? So
Yeah. Thank you.
it pains me to see the lateral violence within the adoptee community. It really, really hurts my heart deeply.
It's hard to see.
Yeah.
But I know what it looks like as well. And I think probably those of us in the community on the call know about it as well. And it is very hard to watch that. And wish I had an answer for it, but it's tough, isn't it?
I think, you know, I think that what I've come to realize is that, you know, it's if each one of us show up with compassion and look at other people as part of the human race, you know, and recognize, like, I think, you know, and then that's what you bring. Because to me, if I'm seeing like a ton of negativity in a comment section, the stuff that stands out to me is always the love that people bring, is the, you know, the light and like the love, right? So
Thank you. I think that is our wish for even a group like NAAP and other groups, for a certain cohesiveness, you know, it's in an umbrella that's broad enough for people with different experiences and perspectives, but united to come here and listen and support each other and share our own stories and listen.
yeah.
I'm curious if in addition to what you learned going into the residential schools, so you must have known growing up, or did you know a lot
Or
growing up about
residential
being
school?
Indigenous? No, about being Indigenous, actually.
Oh, but about me being Indigenous?
Yes.
Yeah.
What did you learn about it? Or
Do you really want to know?
I do.
So, you know, when I was growing up, I think it was an aunt that told me that I was Indigenous. That, or it was my family teasing me about being Native or an Indian, as they would use the word. And so, I knew that I was, but it was never something that I, as a small child, was taught was something I should be proud of. But I was like, as a small child, I would tell people I'm Native. I wanted to share that with people because I don't know. Sometimes I felt like being adopted was like pretty special. Like I was an extra special person in the room because I was adopted. I know that sounds so silly, but I almost felt that way too about being Indigenous. I wanted to share that. I wanted people to acknowledge that. And my adopted mom would say, "You're just a little bit, nothing to speak of." That was that was the line that she would say to me over and over and over again whenever I would share that. And that goes along with the whole having to, blood quantum, what percentage are you? That's just that's a way of disqualifying Indigenous people from the very blood that runs through their body. So so I did always know. And then I think, when you're a little child and you're innocent, you just share things and you have no concept that it's maybe, looked down upon or frowned upon. And then, there came a point in my life where it was like, okay, no, this is not something you should be proud of. This is not something that you should share. As I got older, you would hear lots of Native jokes and that was very, very common here in Canada to tell Native jokes and it. So I've learned very quickly that it was not something I should be proud of. And so part of this journey for me has also been working through self-acceptance and undoing some of that, to be very blunt with you, like internalized racism that I experienced. And dismantling a lot of the racist influences that I had in my life growing up. Like I don't want to say, oh, my family was racist. The culture back then, and I'm not making excuses for it, but the culture back then was very, very different. It was very different. And everybody that I knew had an opinion about Indigenous people being lazy, living off the government, being drunks, that kind of thing. So if that's what they were, I didn't want to be that. I went off on a tangent there, Greg. Sorry.
It's so good.
Yeah, and I think I will say that I think that my Indigenous community has been so patient and kind and knowing that part of that assimilation does come with racism that has to be dismantled. So
I will say on a personal note how much you've helped helped me. We've had conversations about, especially when you talk about blood quantum, for example. Here's what goes in my mind. Do I have a right to, you told me you do, Greg. So I want to play in my mind. It's only 10%, Greg. It's only 10%. It's not like Kristal, for example. It's hard. It's hard to accept somewhat. But I appreciate how much you've worked with me on it. Maybe you didn't realize how impactful the things you said were, but you've helped me say that I do have a right to my heritage.
You do. And, and if you don't have, let's say, if you don't have Irish blood, you don't have Irish blood. But if you do, then you're Irish. Doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. And so you are because you are, because it exists in you. It's part of who you are. Doesn't matter if you're just a tiny little bit. Like, that's ridiculous. Sorry. I'm not saying you're ridiculous, but I'm just saying like
You can tell.
yeah, embrace that. And I can say that's probably been one of my, when I did this film, I had a director that really wanted to push the Indigenous piece to it. And for me, first and foremost, it was a film about being an adopted person, what that was like, speaking from adoptees' perspective, my perspective. And I felt so like, I'm not an Indigenous advocate. I don't even know anything about the culture. I don't even know anything about what, they truly went through. And, at one point I thought, oh, I gotta get educated. I gotta read books. I gotta do this, gotta do that. I couldn't do all of that. But what did happen for me was I began to be invited into these spaces with Indigenous people. And every time I went into these spaces, I learned something. I came away learning something new. And I went back, like I mentioned earlier, that I went back to the Opaskwayak Cree Nation last summer. I took my family back and everything. And they always talk about the importance of getting on the land and reconnecting to the land. And that is a big piece of the healing. And I kind of always thought, really, like I love nature and everything, but I don't know. But something so profound happened when I went back this last time. And what happened was that my identity as an Indigenous person always felt like it was this thing that was outside of me. And it felt like it finally integrated. Like I could own it. I accepted, like, it is who I am. Just like I'm Italian, just like I can be a pain in the ass. I'll accept that, but it integrated. And now I don't feel so afraid to go into those spaces. And in fact, I've been asked to collaborate on a textbook for Canadian curriculum on decolonizing education, because what we learned in school growing up, we did not learn about anything to do with what the truth of what happened to Indigenous people. So.
Wow, that must be a real honor.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
Thank you. It is such an important part of the conversation globally too, including people on the call. So what does a filmmaker do after the film is done? Do you know what the future looks like, or do you only have one film in you, or what happens next as far as you can tell?
No, I caught the bug, and I I was already making the next film in my head before the first one was even done. I did do a podcast that was Because She's Adopted podcast. It was a little 6-part series.
Yeah, it's cool.
And that was exciting to do because that's, again, like podcasting is like, especially video podcasting, it's a form of filmmaking as well. And so that was really cool to do that. I have season 2 coming up for Because She's Adopted podcast. So keep an eye open for that, but it won't probably drop for another year because I received a grant through TELUS Story Hive, who is a Canadian streaming service. And so they decide when the episodes get dropped, when they go out. But I'm going to do some bonus episodes, and those I'll be putting them out fairly soon, but they'll just be audio. They won't be video. I am currently in the process of another documentary with somebody that you know, Greg. But I won't say anything quite yet. And I'm really excited. This individual is a first mother. She's an adoptee. She was born in Canada, but resides in the state, grew up in the States. So, and she's a dear friend of mine. So I will be doing her documentary. I'm really excited about that. And I don't know, I just keep thinking, like, if I can just keep doing films and keep sharing, sharing the story. And the important thing too, like, if you are someone who wants to do a film, you must have at least one person who is an adoptee with you on the project, because it really is important to make sure that our stories get told from our lens, So yeah, so I got that going. And then I have potentially one other documentary that I was approached by a research university here in Canada they wrote a grant for me, actually, to continue to tell the story of how I am continuing to reconnect with my Opaskwayak family. So yeah, so it's, actually, this is the first group of people that I've shared this with. But it's hard because, film takes so long. Like it's not like it's going to be done in 3 months, right? Like, this might be something that's done in 3 years. And so it's a waiting game. It's a waiting game. So I'm over here looking like I'm not doing anything, but I'm like here all the time working. Actually, this wall behind me, it's my inspiration wall. Anytime I have anybody that comes into the studio to film here, I ask them to share a quote or something encouraging, and so that's my wall. And the ceiling is like, it's really, really high. So I'm hoping we're just gonna fill the whole thing up. So
that would be great, and I'm really excited to hear about all the ventures. And I knew that you had to be up to things, and you kind of hinted at a couple of them. But so excited for you, and congratulations on the interest in your story, and you as being effectively a bridge or an ambassador or somebody that can speak authoritatively on these subjects. And wish you all the best in any creative endeavor. And it's also been a real honor to have you on Happy Hour. So I hope you'll come back. I know we said we might talk about the film, or how can people find the film, and where can they find you?
Yeah, yeah. So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok. It's Kristal Parke Official. It used to be because she's adopted, but I changed it just because there was other things that I was doing besides just because she's adopted. And then you can go to my website, kristalparke.net, and you can rent the film there. And you can see, you can also, I have like a YouTube channel where like clips of my film, clips of the podcast are on there. I've actually done some uncut. So like some of the interviews that were done here with some of the people in the film, I've done like an uncut version of them. So it's like a what you never got to see kind of parts of their interviews. So I'll be putting that out soon. Yeah. So that's it. And then I'm on like Spotify, Apple, because she's adopted. You can find the podcast on there as well. And I do want to tell you too, just I don't want to keep tooting my own horn, but this is something I'm really, really proud of as a Canadian, as somebody who grew up with a curriculum that was not truthful about what happened with Indigenous people. My film has been added to a number of university and colleges here in Canada as part of their curriculum. So, you know, that's something that like I never thought. I just wanted to go and tell my story, you know, and I really didn't know where it would take me, and I didn't know how meaningful it was going to be. And so if you have it in you, I just want to say, like, if you have it in you to share, do that, because you just don't know where it's going to take you, and you don't know who needs to hear it. So, but don't share if you're not ready. I would definitely warn against that.
Of wisdom. Well, I'm proud to call you a friend. I'm happy we got to connect just last month and spend some time together. Loved Stuart. What a great guy. And his support for you again is so evident, and his enthusiasm for your project and all the things you're working on. And we certainly wish you again continued success. And I think you're going to go really far in this. I really had that feeling from the beginning, Kristal. I know when we talked about how you're going to get the film out there. And for a while, you're like, I'm not sure how to do this, but
Yeah.
the opportunities are there for you now, and it looks great for you. I'm really happy for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who came and was here today with us. Just so wonderful to be together with everybody. And I love you all. I love this community. I love that we can come together. There was a time where there was not these spaces available, and I'm so grateful that they are available to us now. So
Thanks again, Kristal. Thanks to everybody for coming out. We're going to stop the recording here in just a second and move to a Q&A, but hope everybody will join us for NAAP Happy Hour next time. And we look forward to bringing you more great people. Take care, everybody.